The rain hammered the streets of downtown Manhattan like bullets from heaven, each drop carrying the weight of 1,000 broken dreams. In the shadows of towering skyscrapers, where fortunes were made and lost in milliseconds, a young woman pressed herself against the cold brick wall of an alley, her swollen belly the only warmth in a world that had turned its back on her. Maya Rodriguez clutched the torn cardboard sign to her chest, the words "Please help," pregnant and hungry, smearing in the relentless September downpour. At 22, she should have been planning her future, maybe finishing college, falling in love. Instead, she was counting the coins in her palm. 73 cents. Not enough for a decent meal, barely enough for hope. The restaurant's back door creaked open, and a server emerged with bags of leftover food destined for the dumpster. Maya's heart raced. This was her chance. She struggled to her feet, her 8-month pregnancy making every movement a monumental effort. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Please, could I have some of that food? I haven't eaten in 2 days." The server glanced at her with a mixture of pity and disgust, then hurried past without a word. Maya watched the bags disappear into the dumpster, her last shred of dignity crumbling like the soggy cardboard in her hands. But fate had other plans. As Maya turned to leave, a sleek black Bentley pulled up to the restaurant's valet stand. The door opened, and out stepped Alexander Hartwell III, heir to the Hartwell banking empire, worth more money than most small countries. At 35, he commanded respect in every boardroom he entered, his steel-gray eyes capable of closing billion-dollar deals with a single glance. Tonight, he was meeting potential investors at Le Bernardin, the kind of place where a single meal cost more than Maya made in a month when she still had a job. As he walked toward the entrance, adjusting his Italian silk tie, something made him pause. A flash of movement in the alley caught his eye. Then he saw her, a young woman clearly pregnant, digging through the restaurant's dumpster with desperate hands. Her long black hair fell like a curtain around her face, but when she looked up, their eyes met across the rain-soaked street. Alexander's world stopped. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. "Isabella!" he whispered, the name barely escaping his lips. But that was impossible. Isabella was dead. Had been dead for just 2 years. The car accident that claimed his twin sister's life in 2023 was still fresh enough to make his chest tighten with grief he thought he'd buried. Maya froze under his gaze, clutching a half-eaten sandwich she'd found. Shame burned her cheeks as she realized this impeccably dressed man was watching her lowest moment. She tried to run, but her condition made quick movement impossible. "Wait!" Alexander called out, his voice cutting through the rain like thunder. Something about her face, the curve of her jaw, the way she tilted her head, it was like seeing a ghost. Isabella's ghost. His adopted sister, somehow alive and standing before him, pregnant and desperate in a Manhattan alley. What connection could this desperate woman possibly have to the billionaire's tragic past? And why does her face haunt him with memories of the sister he lost just 2 years ago? Alexander's mind reeled as he approached Maya, his expensive leather shoes splashing through puddles without care. The rain plastered his perfectly styled hair to his forehead, but he didn't notice. All he could see was that face, so eerily similar to Isabella's that his chest tightened with grief he thought he'd buried. "Please don't call the police," Maya whispered, backing against the alley wall. "I wasn't stealing. I was just so hungry." Even her voice carried echoes of Isabella's musical tone. Alexander pulled out his phone, not to call the police, but to cancel his dinner meeting. "I need to reschedule," he told his assistant curtly. "Something urgent has come up." Maya watched in confusion as this strange man ended his call and then, to her amazement, removed his coat, a coat that probably cost more than she'd ever owned, and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're soaked," he said simply. "There's a cafe around the corner. We need to talk." "I can't afford—" Maya began. "My treat," Alexander interrupted, his voice softer now. "Please, I need to understand something." 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in a warm, dimly lit cafe. Maya had ordered soup and bread, eating with the desperation of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Alexander watched her, studying every feature, trying to understand the impossible resemblance. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Maya," she replied between spoonfuls of soup. "Maya Rodriguez." "Rodriguez." Alexander frowned. That's not... What about your mother's maiden name? Maya looked up sharply. Why would you want to know that? Please, it's important. Something in his tone made her answer. Sant'Angelo. My mother was Maria Sant'Angelo before she married my father. Alexander's spoon clattered to the table. Sant'Angelo. Isabella's middle name had been Sant'Angelo, their grandmother's name. It was too much of a coincidence. Tell me about your family, Alexander said, his voice tight with emotion. Maya studied his face, seeing something desperate in his eyes. My mother died when I was 10. Cancer, my father. He left us before I was born. I grew up in foster care mostly. Your mother, what did she look like? People always said we looked alike. Dark hair, dark eyes. She was beautiful. Maya's voice grew wistful. Why are you asking me this? Why do you care about some homeless pregnant girl you found in an alley? Alexander reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn photograph, the only picture he carried of Isabella. With trembling hands, he placed it on the table between them. Maya gasped. The young woman in the photo could have been her twin. Same dark hair, same eyes, same delicate bone structure. This is my sister, Alexander whispered. Isabella. She died 2 years ago in 2023. Maya stared at the photo, then at Alexander, her mind racing. I don't understand. Are you saying we're related? I'm saying it's possible. Isabella was adopted when she was a baby in 1999. We never knew she had any biological family. Alexander's voice cracked with emotion. She was my sister in every way that mattered, but we weren't blood relatives. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. If Maya was Isabella's biological sister, then Alexander had been searching for family he never knew existed, while Maya had grown up alone, thinking she had no one in the world. But before either could process this revelation fully, Maya suddenly doubled over in pain, her hands clutching her swollen belly. Something's wrong, she gasped. The baby, something's happening to my baby. Just as Alexander discovers he may have found his lost family, Maya's pregnancy takes a dangerous turn. Will the shocking truth about their connection be revealed, or will tragedy strike before they can uncover the secrets that bind them together? The ambulance screamed through Manhattan traffic, its sirens cutting through the night like a banshee's wail. Maya lay on the stretcher, her face pale as moonlight, while Alexander held her hand, his expensive suit forgotten, as he focused entirely on this woman who might be his sister's biological family. She's hemorrhaging, the paramedic shouted to his partner. We need to get her to Mount Sinai now. Alexander felt Maya's grip tighten on his hand. Please don't leave me, she whispered. I don't have anyone else. I'm not going anywhere, he promised, surprised by the fierce protectiveness that surged through him. At the hospital, Alexander found himself doing something he'd never done before, using his wealth and influence not for business, but to save someone he barely knew. Within minutes, he'd summoned the best obstetricians in the city, ensuring Maya received the finest care money could buy. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of New York's most respected maternal-fetal medicine specialists, emerged from Maya's room 2 hours later, her expression grave. Mr. Hartwell, she said, recognizing him from society pages, the young woman you brought in, she's severely malnourished. Her body has been depleting its own resources to keep the baby alive. She's at 34 weeks, and we need to deliver now if we're going to save both of them. Alexander felt his world tilt. Will they survive? We're going to do everything we can, but I need to ask, are you the father? We need someone to make medical decisions if she becomes unable to. Alexander paused. He barely knew Maya, yet something deep inside him felt responsible for her. I'll take responsibility for her care. Whatever she needs. Dr. Chen nodded. Whatever she needs. Dr. Chen nodded. We'll prep for an emergency C-section. The next few hours will be critical. As Maya was wheeled into surgery, Alexander found himself alone in the waiting room, staring at the photograph of Isabella that he still clutched in his hand. If Maya truly was Isabella's sister, then the baby she was fighting to deliver would be his nephew or niece. Family he never knew he had. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant, his business partners, his board of directors. A major acquisition was falling apart without his attention. Stock prices were fluctuating. Millions of dollars hung in the balance. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Hartwell III didn't care about money. Hours passed like centuries. Alexander paced the sterile hallways, his mind churning with possibilities and fears. What if Maya didn't survive? What if the baby didn't make it? What if he'd found family only to lose them again? Finally, Dr. Chen emerged from the surgical suite, still in her scrubs. Alexander rushed to her, his heart hammering against his ribs. "They're alive," she said with a tired smile. "Both of them. Maya is weak but stable. And you have a beautiful niece, 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Alexander's knees nearly buckled with relief. "A niece? Congratulations, Uncle Alex," Dr. Chen said warmly. "Would you like to meet her?" The NICU was a symphony of beeping machines and hushed voices. Alexander followed the nurse to a small incubator, where the tiniest human being he'd ever seen lay sleeping peacefully. She had a shock of dark hair and delicate features that reminded him achingly of Isabella. "She's perfect," he whispered, pressing his palm against the incubator's clear wall. "Mr. Hartwell." A social worker appeared beside him, clipboard in hand. "I'm Janet Morrison from Child Services. We need to discuss the baby's situation. The mother has no known relatives, no permanent address, no means of support. Given the circumstances." "No," Alexander said firmly. "She has family now. She has me." Janet looked surprised. "Are you claiming paternity?" "I'm claiming responsibility. For both of them. Maya and the baby will want for nothing." As if summoned by his words, a nurse approached. "Mr. Hartwell." "Maya is awake. She's asking for you." Alexander found Maya in her hospital bed, looking fragile but alert. Her eyes immediately found his, and he saw a mixture of gratitude and confusion in their depths. "My baby," she whispered. "She's beautiful, perfect, just like her mother." Alexander surprised himself with the tenderness in his voice. Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you. The surgery, the private room, the specialists. I know I can't afford any of this." "You don't need to afford it. You don't need to thank me." Alexander pulled a chair beside her bed. "Maya, we need to talk about your mother, about Maria Santangelo." Maya studied his face. "You think we're related, don't you? You think I'm connected to your sister somehow. I think it's possible, and I know someone who might have answers." Alexander pulled out his phone. "My family's lawyer handled Isabella's adoption. He's old now, mostly retired, but he might still have records." As Alexander made the call, Maya watched him with growing amazement. This man, this billionaire who could have walked past her in that alley without a second thought, was now moving heaven and earth to help her. But why? What did he see in her that made him care so much? The answer would come sooner than either of them expected, and it would change both their lives forever. Alexander ended his call and turned back to Maya, his expression unreadable. Harold Pemberton, the lawyer who handled Isabella's adoption, is still alive. He's 93 and lives in a nursing home upstate. But Maya... Alexander paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He says he remembers the case, and he says there's something we need to know about Isabella's biological family. Something that was sealed in the adoption records." Maya's heart began to race. What kind of something? He wouldn't say over the phone. "We need to see him in person." Alexander reached for her hand. "Maya, are you prepared to learn the truth about who you really are? Because I have a feeling our connection goes deeper than just physical resemblance. What shocking secrets lie buried in Isabella's adoption records? And how will the truth about Maya's identity change everything Alexander thought he knew about his beloved sister's past?" 3 days later, Alexander's private car wound through the autumn hills of upstate New York toward Sunset Manor, an exclusive nursing facility where the wealthy stored their elderly like precious artifacts. Maya sat beside him, still weak from surgery, but determined to uncover the truth about her past. In her arms, she held baby Sophia, named for Isabella's middle name, who slept peacefully despite the life-changing journey ahead. Harold Pemberton waited for them in the Manor's elegant library, a frail man whose mind remained sharp despite his 93 years. His wheelchair was positioned by a window overlooking golden maples, and his gnarled hands held a thick manila folder that seemed to pulse with secrets. "Alexander," Harold said, his voice carrying the weight of decades, "you look so much like your father. And you, my dear," he turned to Maya. "You are the very image of someone I hoped I'd never see again." Maya felt a chill run through her. "What do you mean?" Harold's rheumy eyes studied her face with uncomfortable intensity. "Before we begin, I need you both to understand something. What I'm about to tell you was sealed for good reason. Some secrets are buried to protect the living, not just the dead." Alexander leaned forward. "Harold, we need to know the truth. Maya has a right to understand her connection to Isabella." "Indeed she does." Harold opened the folder with trembling fingers. Isabella Santangelo was born on March 15, 1999, to Maria Elena Santangelo, age 16. The father was listed as unknown, but that wasn't entirely true. Maya's breath caught. "My mother was 16 when she had Isabella. She would have been just a child herself." "Maria was in an impossible situation," Harold continued. "She was pregnant by someone she couldn't name, someone powerful, someone dangerous. She gave birth to Isabella in secret and immediately placed her for adoption through our firm." Alexander frowned. "You said someone dangerous." "Yes, what do you mean?" Harold pulled out a photograph, an old Polaroid that made Maya gasp. It showed a young woman who looked exactly like her, holding a baby. On the back, someone had written Maria and Isabella, March 1999. "Your mother Maya didn't disappear from Isabella's life after the adoption. She stayed in New York, working as a housekeeper to stay close to her daughter. She took jobs in the Hartwell household staff." The room fell silent except for baby Sophia's gentle breathing. Alexander stared at Harold in shock. "Maria worked for my family? For how long?" 7 years. From 1999 to 2006. She watched Isabella grow up from a distance, never revealing her identity, until the accident." Maya felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "My mother worked for you?" "She was in Isabella's life." "More than that," Harold said grimly. "She died saving Isabella's life." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Alexander gripped the arms of his chair. "What are you saying?" Harold pulled out a police report dated December 18, 2006. The official story was that Maria Santangelo, a household employee, died in a car accident while running an errand for the family. But that wasn't the whole truth. Maria discovered that someone was targeting Isabella, someone who knew about her parentage and wanted her dead. Maya's world began to spin. Someone wanted to kill Isabella, but why? Because Isabella wasn't just Maria's daughter. She was also the daughter of Vincent Torino. The name hung in the air like poison. Alexander's face went white. "Torino? The crime boss?" "One of the most powerful men in organized crime at the time," Harold confirmed. Maria was 16 when Vincent, then in his 40s, forced himself on her. Isabella was the result of that assault. Maya felt sick. Her sister, had been the product of violence, the daughter of a monster. When Vincent learned he had a daughter, he wanted her eliminated, Harold continued. He couldn't risk the scandal, couldn't risk someone using Isabella against him. Maria found out about the threat. On December 18, 2006, she was driving Isabella to safety when Vincent's men caught up with them. Alexander's voice was barely a whisper. The car accident wasn't an accident. Maria deliberately crashed the car into the river to avoid Vincent's men. She drowned, but not before getting Isabella to safety. The official report listed it as an accident to protect Isabella's identity and keep her safe from Vincent's people. Maya clutched baby Sophia closer, understanding now why she'd grown up in foster care after her mother's death in 2015, why her mother had died so young, why she'd never known the truth about her family. Vincent died of a heart attack in 2009, Harold said. Most of his organization was disbanded or absorbed by other families. Isabella was safe, but she never knew any of this. We thought the secrets died with Vincent, but they didn't, Alexander said grimly. Died with Vincent, but they didn't, Alexander said grimly. Because Maya exists. She's Maria's other daughter. Harold nodded. Born 4 years after Isabella in 2003 to the same mother. And now she's here asking questions, drawing attention to connections that some people might prefer remained buried. Maya looked up sharply. What do you mean? Vincent is dead. Who would care now? Vincent had a son, Harold said quietly. Marco Torino. He took over what remained of his father's empire and has spent the last 16 years building it back up. If he learns that his father had daughters who survived, if he learns that one now has a daughter of her own, the implications were terrifying. Maya wasn't just Isabella's sister. She was Vincent Torino's daughter too, and baby Sophia was Vincent Torino's granddaughter. Alexander stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "We need protection, security, I need to call—" "Alexander," Harold interrupted. "There's more." "More?" Maya couldn't imagine what else there could be. Harold pulled out a final document, a DNA test report. "I had this done years ago, when questions arose about Isabella's parentage. We needed to be certain about Vincent's connection." He handed the report to Maya. Her hands shook as she read the results. "This says Isabella and I share the same mother, but—" Maya's voice trailed off as she read further. "This says we have the same father too." Harold nodded grimly. "Vincent Torino assaulted Maria twice. Once when she was 16, once when she was 20. Isabella and Maya are full sisters, both daughters of a monster." The room spun around Maya. Not only was she Isabella's sister, but they shared the same violent father. Vincent Torino had destroyed her mother's life twice, creating two daughters through violence and fear. Alexander returned to his seat, his face hard as granite. "Where is Marco Torino now?" "He runs legitimate businesses as a front, but everyone knows what he really is. Construction, restaurants, waste management. He's based in New Jersey, but he has interests all over the city." Harold closed the folder. "If he learns about Maya and the baby—" "He won't," Alexander said with deadly certainty. "I'll make sure of that." But even as he spoke those words, none of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows outside the library window, or the telephoto lens capturing their every expression. Marco Torino already knew about Maya Rodriguez. He'd known since the moment she'd appeared on his radar 3 days ago, when a homeless pregnant woman had somehow caught the attention of one of the most powerful men in New York. And now, finally, he could finish what his father had started 26 years ago. With their shocking family history revealed, Maya and Alexander face a deadly new threat. But as Marco Torino closes in on his targets, will Alexander's wealth and power be enough to protect the family he's just discovered? And what price will they all pay for the sins of Vincent Torino's violent past? Marco Torino stood in his penthouse office overlooking the Hudson River, studying surveillance photos spread across his mahogany desk. At 48, he possessed his father's cold intelligence but none of Vincent's impulsive brutality. Marco was a predator who planned his kills with the precision of a surgeon. "Are you certain it's her?" he asked his lieutenant, Tommy Russo, a thick-set man whose loyalty was bought with fear and money. "DNA confirms it. The homeless broad is Vincent's kid, all right. And get this, she's got a baby now. Your old man's granddaughter." Marco's jaw tightened. For 16 years, he'd believed Vincent's bastard daughters had been neutralized. Isabella's death in that car accident in 2023 had seemed like divine justice, the bloodline finally severed. But now this Maya Rodriguez had crawled out of the gutters like a cockroach, drawing the attention of Alexander Hartwell and threatening to expose secrets that could destroy everything Marco had built. "What do we know about her connection to Hartwell?" Marco asked. "Near as we can figure, he thinks she's related to his dead sister somehow. He's been throwing money around, paying for her hospital bills, private doctors, the works. Word is he's getting attached." Marco smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Good. Attachments make people vulnerable. What about security?" Hartwell's beefed up his personal detail, but the girl's still recovering. Vulnerable. No. Marco moved to the window, watching boats navigate the dark water below. "We don't move while she's under Hartwell's protection. Too messy, too public. We wait until she's isolated. Boss, with respect, why not just eliminate them both? Hartwell's been a thorn in legitimate business circles for years." "Two birds, one stone." Marco turned, his eyes cold as winter steel. "Because Alexander Hartwell's death would bring federal investigation, media attention, questions we don't need answered. The Rodriguez woman is nobody. A homeless addict who overdosed or a tragic accident. Those stories write themselves." Tommy nodded, understanding. "What about the baby?" For a moment, Marco's expression flickered with something that might have been regret. Then it hardened again. Loose ends need to be tied off. All of them. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander was implementing security measures that would have made the Secret Service proud. Maya's hospital room was now guarded around the clock by former military contractors. His own security team had been tripled. Every entrance and exit from the hospital was monitored. But as he sat beside Maya's bed, watching her nurse baby Sophia, Alexander realized that all the money and muscle in the world couldn't protect them from the truth that was slowly destroying him from within. Maya looked up from the baby, catching his expression. "You're thinking about Isabella again?" It wasn't a question. Over the past few days, she'd learned to read the subtle shifts in Alexander's face. The way his jaw tightened when he thought about his sister, the way his eyes grew distant when he considered the implications of what they'd learned. "I keep thinking about all the years she was right there in my house and I never knew. My parents never knew." Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper. "Maria was watching her daughter grow up, protecting her, and we treated her like just another employee. My mother chose that," Maya said gently. "She chose to stay close to Isabella, even if it meant living a lie. She loved her enough to give her up and then loved her enough to die saving her." Alexander reached for Maya's hand. "And now I understand why you look so much like Isabella. You're not just sisters. You're full sisters born from the same nightmare." The weight of their shared trauma hung between them, both daughters of a monster, both shaped by violence they'd never directly experienced, but that had defined their entire lives. "Alexander," Maya said carefully, "what happens now? When I leave the hospital, where do Sophia and I go? We can't hide forever." Before Alexander could answer, his head of security, James Chen, entered the room. The former Marine's face was grim. "Sir, we have a problem. Someone's been asking questions about Miss Rodriguez at her old neighborhood. Homeless shelters, soup kitchens, places she used to frequent, professional questions." Alexander felt ice form in his stomach. "Torino?" "Most likely. They're being subtle about it, but they're mapping her life, looking for patterns, weaknesses." Maya looked between them, fear creeping into her voice. "What does that mean?" "It means they're hunting you," Alexander said bluntly. "And they're good at it." James continued his report. "There's more. We intercepted communication suggesting they know about the baby. They're planning something, but we don't know what or when." Alexander stood, his mind racing through possibilities and contingencies. "We need to disappear, all of us. New identities, new location, complete separation from anything Torino could trace." "I can arrange that," James said. "But it'll take time and it means giving up everything. Your business, your life here, everything you've built." Alexander looked at Maya and baby Sophia, these two fragile lives that had somehow become the center of his universe in less than a week. "Some things are worth more than money," he said firmly. But even as he spoke those words, Alexander's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was blocked, but somehow he knew he had to answer. "Alexander Hartwell," he said. "Mr. Hartwell." The voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of New York accent. "This is Marco Torino. I believe we have something to discuss." Alexander's blood turned to ice. He gestured frantically to James, who began tracing the call. "I don't believe we have anything to discuss, Mr. Torino." "Oh, but we do. You see, you've become quite attached to something that belongs to me. My family's legacy, you might say. Maya Rodriguez doesn't belong to anyone." Marco's laugh was soft and dangerous. "Maya Rodriguez is the daughter of Vincent Torino. That makes her part of my family's business, and family business needs to be handled properly." Alexander felt rage building in his chest. "If you go near her—" "Mr. Hartwell, please. I'm not some street thug making threats. I'm a businessman offering a proposition. You have something I need. Access to my father's daughters and granddaughter. I have something you need. The ability to make this problem disappear permanently." "What are you proposing?" "A meeting. Tomorrow night. Just you and me. We discuss how to resolve this situation like civilized men." Alexander looked at Maya, who was listening to his side of the conversation with growing terror. "And if I refuse, then I stop being civilized. And if I refuse, then I stop being civilized. And Mr. Hartwell, you really don't want to see what I'm capable of when I'm not being civilized." The line went dead. James looked up from his tracing equipment. "We got a partial location, cell tower in Manhattan, but he was moving. Professional job, impossible to pin down exactly." Maya's voice was small, frightened. "He wants to kill us, doesn't he?" Alexander sat back down beside her, taking her hand in both of his. "Not if I have anything to say about it. But privately, Alexander wondered if his money and power would be enough to protect them from a man whose family had been perfecting murder for generations. Outside the hospital, in a nondescript van parked across the street, Tommy Russo lowered his binoculars and smiled. Phase 1 was complete. Hartwell was scared, off balance, making emotional decisions instead of smart ones. Tomorrow night's meeting would be the beginning of the end, and by the time it was over, Vincent Torino's bloodline would finally be severed forever. With Marco Torino closing in and demanding a face-to-face meeting, Alexander must choose between his own safety and protecting the family he's just discovered. But what deadly trap is Marco setting? And can Alexander outmaneuver a man who spent his entire life perfecting the art of murder? The Celestial Club occupied the top 3 floors of a Manhattan skyscraper, a playground for the ultra-wealthy, where membership cost more than most people's homes. It was neutral territory in the city's hidden war between legitimate power and criminal influence, a place where both sides could meet without the messiness of public scrutiny. Alexander arrived at exactly midnight, as Marco had specified. He'd left Maya and Sophia under the protection of his security team at a safe house in the Hamptons, but every minute away from them felt like an eternity. The elevator climbed silently toward the 47th floor, each floor marking another step deeper into the devil's territory. Marco Torino waited in a private dining room overlooking the glittering cityscape. He looked nothing like Alexander had expected. No gold chains, no obvious displays of wealth. Instead, Marco wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and spoke with the cultured accent of someone educated at the finest schools. Only his eyes betrayed the predator beneath the polish. "Mr. Hartwell," Marco stood as Alexander entered. "Thank you for coming. I trust your family is safe and comfortable." The subtle threat wasn't lost on Alexander. Marco knew about the safe house, probably knew exactly where Maya and Sophia were at this very moment. "What do you want, Torino?" Marco gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit. This doesn't have to be unpleasant." Alexander remained standing. "I asked what you want. Direct. I appreciate that in a man." Marco poured himself a glass of wine, something that probably cost more than most cars. "I want the same thing you want, Mr. Hartwell. I want this problem to disappear. Maya isn't a problem. She's a human being. She's Vincent Torino's daughter. That makes her a complication that needs to be resolved." Marco's voice remained conversational, as if they were discussing stock prices. "You see, my father spent years building something valuable. When he died in 2009, I inherited not just his business interests, but his enemies, his debts, his mistakes. Maya Rodriguez represents one of those mistakes." Alexander finally sat down, his body coiled with tension. "What kind of mistake? The kind that could destroy everything I've spent 16 years building." Marco leaned back in his chair. "You have to understand, Mr. Hartwell, legitimacy is a fragile thing. I've invested billions in creating a respectable empire. Construction companies, restaurants, waste management, real estate development. Politicians take my calls. Society wives invite me to their charity galas. Banks compete for my business, all built on blood money." Marco smiled. "All built on smart investments and careful reputation management. But reputation is like crystal, beautiful when intact, worthless once shattered. And Maya Rodriguez, with her connection to Vincent Torino, represents a hammer aimed directly at my crystal palace." Alexander felt a chill of understanding. "You're worried she'll go public. Expose your father's crimes." "I'm worried she'll exist," Marco corrected. "Every day Maya Rodriguez breathes, she's evidence of Vincent Torino's brutality. Every interview she gives, every photograph taken, every document filed in her name, they all connect back to crimes that could bring down legitimate politicians. Judges, business leaders who've built their careers on distance from the Torino name. So you want to kill her to protect your reputation?" Marco's expression hardened slightly. "I want to resolve a business problem permanently." Alexander leaned forward. "And what does that have to do with me?" "You've become emotionally invested in her survival. That creates an opportunity." Marco opened a leather portfolio on the table between them. "I'm prepared to offer you something no one else could." The first document was a death certificate dated December 18th, 2006. Maria Santangelo's death certificate, except this one listed the cause of death as multiple gunshot wounds instead of drowning. Alexander's breath caught. The real cause of death, My father had Maria Santangelo tortured and executed, Marco said calmly. He wanted to know where Isabella was hidden, wanted to finish what he'd started. Maria died without revealing her daughter's location. The second document made Alexander's vision blur with rage. It was a coroner's report, detailing evidence of prolonged torture, burns, broken bones. Maria had endured hours of agony before her death. Isabella lived a wonderful life because Maria Santangelo died one of the most horrible deaths imaginable, Marco continued. And now I'm offering to make sure Maya doesn't suffer the same fate. What's your offer? Marco slid a third document across the table, a contract. $1 billion transferred to accounts of your choosing. In exchange, you deliver Maya Rodriguez and her child to me. They disappear quietly, painlessly. You walk away wealthy enough to buy yourself a small country and clear conscience knowing they didn't suffer. Alexander stared at the contract, his mind reeling. $1 billion, more money than most people could comprehend, offered for the lives of two innocent people. And if I refuse? Marco's smile was cold as winter. Then I stop being a gentleman. Maya Rodriguez dies anyway, but not quickly, not painlessly. And you die with her, along with anyone else who's helped her. Your security team, your employees, your business partners, everyone becomes a loose end that needs tying off. Alexander felt the walls closing in around him. Marco wasn't just threatening Maya and Sophia. He was threatening everyone Alexander cared about. I need time to think, of course. 24 hours seems reasonable. Marco stood, straightening his jacket. But, Mr. Hartwell, understand this. Maya Rodriguez will not see the end of this week. The only question is whether she dies surrounded by the people she loves, or watching them die first. Alexander left the Celestial Club feeling like he'd been poisoned. The city sparkled below him, but all he could see were the crime scene photos of Maria Santangelo's tortured body. All he could hear were Marco's civilized threats. He had 24 hours to save the lives of the two people who had become his entire world. $1 billion for their deaths, or war with one of the most dangerous men in America for their lives. As his car raced through the empty streets toward the safe house, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. In case you're wondering about your security arrangements. Attached was a photograph taken from inside the supposedly secure safe house. Maya sat nursing Sophia, unaware she was being watched. The message was clear. Marco's reach extended everywhere. Alexander called James Chen immediately. We've been compromised, he said without preamble. Move them. Now. Sir, where? I don't care where. Just get them somewhere safe. But even as he gave the order, Alexander wondered if anywhere in the world was safe from Marco Torino's influence. The man had spent 16 years building a network of corruption and violence that seemed to touch every corner of power in New York. How do you fight an enemy who owns judges, politicians, and police? How do you protect innocent lives when money and law mean nothing? Alexander was about to discover that some battles couldn't be won with wealth or influence. Some enemies could only be defeated by descending to their level and fighting with the same ruthless brutality they used. The question was, how far was Alexander Hartwell willing to fall to save the family he'd found in an alley just 1 week ago? With Marco's deadline approaching and Maya's location compromised, Alexander faces an impossible choice. But as he contemplates desperate measures to save the two people who have become his world, will his decision transform him into the very monster he's fighting against? The safe house in Connecticut looked peaceful in the pre-dawn darkness of September 25th, surrounded by forest and accessible only by a single winding road. Inside, Maya slept fitfully while Sophia nursed, both unaware that their sanctuary had become a trap. Alexander arrived just as James Chen was coordinating the evacuation. Moving vans waited in the driveway, while security personnel swept the house for listening devices and hidden cameras. They'd found 7 so far. How long have we been compromised? Alexander asked grimly. Probably since we moved them here, James replied. These devices are professional grade, military specification. Torino's people have been watching everything. Alexander felt sick. For 3 days he'd believed Maya and Sophia were safe, while Marco's men documented their every movement, every conversation, every moment of vulnerability. Sir, one of James's men called from the living room, you need to see this. Alexander followed him to where Maya had been sleeping. Pinned to her pillow was a photograph, a picture of Sophia sleeping in her crib taken from inside the room. The message was clear. We can reach her any time we want. Pack everything, Alexander ordered. We leave in 10 minutes. But as they prepared to move Maya and Sophia to yet another location, Alexander's phone rang. Marco Torino's voice was as calm as if he were ordering coffee. Mr. Hartwell, I hope you're not planning to run. Running would be disappointing. The deal's off, Torino. I'm not delivering them to you. I was afraid you might say that. Marco sighed theatrically. Caio forced me to demonstrate the difference between civilization and savagery. Alexander felt ice form in his stomach. What are you talking about? Turn on the news, Mr. Hartwell. Channel 7. Alexander grabbed the remote with trembling hands. The morning news was broadcasting breaking coverage of a warehouse fire in Queens. The reporter stood before a building engulfed in flames, while firefighters battled the blaze. Explosion occurred at approximately 5 a.m. at this Queens warehouse owned by Hartwell Industries. Fire department sources confirmed that several people were trapped inside when the building collapsed. Alexander's world tilted. The warehouse was one of his smaller holdings, used for document storage, and staffed by a skeleton crew of security guards and maintenance workers. Good people. Innocent people. How many? Alexander whispered into the phone. 7 so far, Marco replied. But the building's still burning. Could be more. You murdered 7 innocent people. I eliminated loose ends. Your company employed them, which made them connected to you, which made them connected to this situation. Marco's voice never wavered from its conversational tone. This is what happens when you force me to be uncivilized, Mr. Hartwell. Alexander watched the news coverage, seeing ambulances and body bags, knowing that 7 families were about to receive the worst news of their lives because he'd refused to sacrifice Maya and Sophia. You have 18 hours left to reconsider, Marco continued. And Mr. Hartwell, every hour you delay, more innocent people die. Your employees, your business partners, their families, the circle keeps expanding until you make the right choice. The line went dead. Maya appeared in the doorway, holding Sophia and looking terrified. Alexander, what's happening? He couldn't tell her. Couldn't explain that 7 people had died because he'd chosen her life over theirs. Couldn't admit that Marco was systematically murdering anyone connected to Alexander until he surrendered. We need to leave, he said instead. Now. But as they loaded into the convoy of vehicles, Alexander knew they weren't just running from Marco anymore. They were running from the growing body count that followed in their wake. The safe house in upstate New York was supposedly impregnable, a former military installation purchased by Alexander's security company and converted into a fortress. But as their convoy wound through the mountain roads, Alexander's phone continued to buzz with news alerts. A restaurant owned by one of Alexander's business partners had exploded during the lunch rush. 3 dead, 12 injured. A law office that handled Hartwell Industries contracts had been firebombed. 2 attorneys and their secretary had died in the inferno. Each message was followed by a text from Marco. Still have 17 hours. Then 16. Then 15. Maya noticed Alexander's growing desperation. Talk to me, she said as they sat in the back of an armored SUV. What aren't you telling me? Alexander looked at her. This woman who looked so much like Isabella, who'd endured a lifetime of hardship and was now holding her daughter with fierce protective love. How could he explain that her very existence was causing innocent people to die? Marco is escalating, Alexander said carefully. He's trying to force my hand. By threatening us? By threatening everyone. Alexander showed her his phone. 17 missed calls from business associates, employees, friends, all wondering why people connected to Hartwell Industries were dying. He's not just targeting you anymore, Maya. He's targeting anyone who might help you. Maya's face went pale. Oh God, this is my fault. People are dying because of me. No, Alexander said firmly. People are dying because Marco Torino is a monster. This isn't your fault. But privately, Alexander wondered if Maya was right. If he'd never found her in that alley, if he'd walked past like any normal person would have, would those 7 warehouse workers still be alive? Would the restaurant employees still be serving lunch instead of lying in the morgue? When they reached the mountain safe house, Alexander made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. James, he called his security chief aside, I need you to do something for me. Something that goes against everything we've ever discussed. Sir, I need you to find me everything, and I mean everything on Marco Torino's personal life. His family, his businesses, his associates, everyone he cares about. James looked uncomfortable. Sir, are you asking me to target civilians? Because if you're thinking about retaliating against Torino's family, I'm thinking about survival. Alexander cut him off. Marco understands one language, consequences. He's killing innocent people to force my hand. Maybe it's time he understood what it feels like to have his own people at risk. Mr. Hartwell, with respect, that's not who you are. You don't hurt innocent people. Alexander stared out at the mountains surrounding their fortress, watching shadows lengthen as afternoon turned to evening. In 18 hours, Marco would expect an answer. In 18 hours, more innocent people would die if Alexander didn't surrender Maya and Sophia. Maybe it's time I became someone different, Alexander said quietly. James was quiet for a long moment. I'll get you the intelligence. But sir, once you cross this line, you can't uncross it. You become the thing you're fighting against. Then so be it. As James left to compile the intelligence, Alexander returned to Maya and Sophia. They sat in the safe house's living room, surrounded by bulletproof glass and armed guards, yet somehow managing to create a bubble of peace in the chaos. Maya looked up as he entered. You look like you've made a terrible decision. Alexander sat beside her, marveling at how well she'd learned to read him in just 1 week. Maybe I have. Tell me. Marco is playing by rules that let him murder innocent people while I try to stay civilized. Maybe it's time I stopped playing by different rules than he is. Maya shifted Sophia to one arm and took Alexander's hand with the other. My mother died protecting Isabella from Vincent Torino's violence. She didn't become a monster to fight the monster. She stayed who she was even when it killed her. And look how that ended. Isabella died anyway just 2 years ago. But Isabella lived 24 beautiful years because my mother chose love over revenge. She got to grow up in a loving family, got to experience joy and safety and all the things children should have. Maya's voice grew stronger. If my mother had become like Vincent to fight him, what would Isabella's life have been? What would yours have been? Alexander felt tears he'd been holding back for days finally spill over. I don't know how to save you both without becoming him. Maybe, Maya said softly. The answer isn't becoming stronger than Marco Torino. Maybe it's becoming smarter. Before Alexander could ask what she meant, his phone buzzed with another news alert. A community center in Brooklyn, one that Alexander's foundation supported, had been bombed. The death toll was climbing. Marco's message arrived seconds later. 14 hours remaining. How many more need to die for your pride? Alexander looked at Maya and Sophia, then at the growing list of casualties on his phone. Somewhere in the darkness beyond their mountain fortress, Marco Torino was systematically destroying every connection Alexander had ever made, every life he'd touched, every person who'd shown him loyalty or friendship. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Surrender 2 lives to save dozens, or watch an entire network of innocent people die while he played protector to a woman and child he'd known for 1 week. But as Alexander stared into Maya's eyes that looked so much like Isabella's, he realized the mathematics weren't the point. The point was who he chose to become in this moment of ultimate testing. Would he sacrifice innocence to save innocence? Would he become Marco Torino to defeat Marco Torino? Or would he find another way, a path his sister Isabella and her mother Maria had somehow missed? Maya, he said quietly, what if I told you I had a way to end this? A way that might save everyone, but would require you and Sophia to trust me completely? Maya studied his face, seeing something there that both frightened and reassured her. What kind of way? The kind that turns the hunter into the hunted. The kind that uses Marco's own methods against him. The kind that uses Marco's own methods against him. Alexander's voice grew harder. But it would mean putting you and Sophia in more danger than you've ever faced, at least temporarily. More dangerous than being hunted by the mob. Much more dangerous, because we'd be walking directly into their trap. Maya was quiet for a long moment, looking down at Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms. Finally, she met Alexander's eyes again. If you think it's our only chance, then we trust you. Alexander felt the weight of that trust, like a physical thing. 2 lives placed completely in his hands, depending on his ability to outthink a man who'd spent his entire life perfecting the art of murder. "Then we're going to need to make some calls," Alexander said. "And Maya, before this is over, you're going to have to do something that goes against every instinct you have." "What?" Alexander's smile was grim as winter. "You're going to have to meet your brother." As Alexander prepares a desperate gambit that will put Maya and Sophia directly in Marco's path, what deadly game is he planning? And how can walking into the lion's den possibly save them from the monster who's been systematically destroying everyone Alexander cares about? Alexander's plan was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. As dawn broke over the mountains on September 26th, he made a series of phone calls that would either save everyone he cared about or get them all killed. The first call was to Marco Torino. "Mr. Hartwell," Marco's voice carried satisfaction. "I trust you've seen the morning news." Alexander had. The community center bombing had claimed 12 lives, including 3 children. The images of tiny body bags being loaded into ambulances had nearly broken his resolve. "I have a counter-proposal," Alexander said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I'm listening. You want Maya and Sophia delivered to you. I want the killing to stop, but I also want something else. I want to know why you really need them dead." Marco was quiet for a moment. "What are you proposing?" "A meeting. You, me, Maya, and Sophia, face to face. You tell us the real reason Vincent Torino's daughters need to die, and if I'm satisfied with your explanation, I'll walk away. And if you're not satisfied, then we all die together and your secret dies with us." It was a bluff, Alexander hoped. Marco needed something more than just Maya's death, or he would have killed her already instead of negotiating. There was something else, something that required her cooperation or confession. "Interesting," Marco said finally. "Very well. Tonight, 10 p.m. The old Torino warehouse in Red Hook. Come alone. Just you, Maya, and the baby." "How do I know you won't just kill us all the moment we arrive?" Marco's laugh was genuinely amused. "Mr. Hartwell, if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. No, this requires a more delicate touch." After ending the call, Alexander turned to Maya, who had been listening with growing horror. "You want to deliver us directly to him? That's your brilliant plan?" "Part of it," Alexander admitted. "Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer." "Okay. Is there anything about your mother's past? Anything about Isabella, anything about your family that you haven't told me? Any secrets? Any information that someone might kill to keep hidden?" Maya shook her head. "I've told you everything I know. I was 10 when my mother died in 2015. I barely remember her, let alone her secrets." Alexander nodded, but something nagged at him. Marco was too careful, too professional to kill dozens of people, just to eliminate witnesses to his father's crimes. There had to be something else. The second phase of Alexander's plan involved James Chen and a team of investigators working frantically throughout the day. By evening, they had assembled a complete dossier on Marco Torino's life, business interests, and most importantly, his vulnerabilities. "Sir," James reported as the sun set, "we found something. Marco Torino has a daughter, Elena, age 16. She attends a private boarding school in Switzerland, completely isolated from her father's business." Alexander felt a surge of hope. Does she know about her grandfather's crimes? About what her father really does? "According to our sources, she believes her father is a legitimate businessman. She has no idea about the family history, the violence, any of it. And if she found out, she'd be devastated. According to her teachers, she's idealistic, wants to go into social work, help victims of violence. Learning her family fortune was built on murder, and extortion would destroy her worldview. It was leverage, but using it would make Alexander no better than Marco. Threatening an innocent 16-year-old girl was exactly the kind of tactic that separated civilized people from monsters. But as Alexander remembered the images of the children killed in the community center bombing, he realized he was already past the point of moral purity. The third phase of his plan was the most dangerous, and it required Maya's complete trust. "There's something I haven't told you," Alexander said as they prepared to leave for the meeting. "Something about Isabella's death." Maya looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "The official story was that Isabella died in a car accident in 2023 when she was 24. But James did some digging. Isabella didn't die in an accident. She was murdered. The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Murdered by who? We don't know for certain, but the timing suggests it was connected to Vincent Torino's legacy. Someone wanted Isabella dead for the same reason Marco wants you dead now. Maya felt the world spinning around her. You think Marco killed Isabella? I think someone did, and I think tonight we're going to find out who and why. As they drove toward Red Hook, Alexander explained the rest of his plan. It was insane, dangerous, and required Maya to do something that terrified her, but it was their only chance. The old Torino warehouse sat on a pier overlooking the East River, a monument to Vincent's violent empire. Alexander's car pulled up to the entrance at exactly 10 p.m., its headlights cutting through the fog rolling off the water. Marco waited inside with a small army of bodyguards, but to Alexander's surprise, he wasn't the only one present. A woman in her 60s sat beside Marco, elegant, well-dressed, with the kind of cold beauty that spoke of a lifetime of secrets. "Mr. Hartwell," Marco said, "I'd like you to meet my mother, Catherine Torino. She has something to tell you about Isabella." Maya clutched Sophia closer as they approached. Alexander felt every instinct screaming at him to run, but he forced himself to walk calmly toward the trap. Catherine Torino studied Maya with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. "My God," she whispered, "she really does look exactly like her." "Like who?" Maya asked. "Like Isabella, of course, but also like Maria." Catherine's voice carried decades of pain. "You see, my dear, there's something about your mother's death that even you don't know." Alexander felt the pieces of the puzzle shifting, realigning into a picture he didn't want to see. "Maria Sant'Angelo wasn't just Vincent's victim," Catherine continued. "She was also my best friend, my maid of honor at my wedding, the only person who knew the truth about what kind of monster I'd married." Maya's legs nearly gave out. "You knew my mother?" "I loved your mother, and I killed her." The confession hung in the air like poison. Catherine continued in a voice devoid of emotion. "Maria came to me in December 2006. She'd learned that Vincent had discovered Isabella's location and was planning to have her killed. She begged me to help, to use my influence to stop him." Alexander felt sick understanding. "But you couldn't stop Vincent without revealing that you'd been helping Maria all along." "I had a choice," Catherine said simply. "Let Vincent kill Isabella, or let him kill Maria and keep Isabella safe. I chose to sacrifice my oldest friend to save an innocent girl." Maya was crying now, clutching Sophia so tightly the baby began to fuss. "You betrayed her. She trusted you and you had her murdered. I had her killed quickly, painlessly. Vincent would have tortured her for weeks." Catherine's voice never wavered. "It was a mercy." "Why?" Maya whispered. "Why are you telling me this?" Marco stepped forward. "Because Isabella found out. In 2023, she learned the truth about her mother's death and her connection to our family. She was planning to go public, to expose everything." Alexander felt the final piece click into place. "So you had Isabella killed too." "Isabella's death was necessary," Catherine said, "just as yours is necessary now. You see, dear, you're not just Vincent's daughter. You're also the only person left who can connect our family to Maria's murder. With you dead, the secret dies forever." Alexander realized with horror that his plan had backfired completely. He'd walked Maya and Sophia directly into the hands of the people who'd killed both Maria and Isabella, thinking he was clever enough to outmaneuver them. But Maya surprised everyone by laughing, a sound completely at odds with the deadly situation they faced. "You're wrong," she said, still crying but smiling through her tears. "The secret doesn't die with me." Marco frowned. "What do you mean?" Maya looked at Alexander, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Not fear, but triumph. "Tell them, Alexander. Tell them what we really came here to do. As the shocking truth about Isabella and Maria's murders is revealed, what final card does Maya have to play? And how can she and Alexander possibly escape alive when they're surrounded by the very people who've been orchestrating their family's destruction for decades?" Alexander smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, it was a genuine smile filled with something Marco and Catherine Torino had never expected to see: victory. "You made one critical mistake," Alexander said calmly. "You assumed we came here as victims." Marco's hand moved toward his weapon. "What are you talking about?" "We came here as witnesses." Alexander pulled out his phone, showing the screen to everyone in the warehouse. A red recording indicator pulsed steadily. Everything you just confessed, Maria's murder, Isabella's murder, the real reason you want Maya dead, it's all been broadcast live. Catherine's face went white. Broadcast where? Everywhere, Maya said, standing straighter despite her fear. FBI, NYPD, Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and about 50 news outlets. Oh, and your daughter Elena's boarding school in Switzerland. I imagine she's watching right now, learning exactly what kind of family fortune pays for her education. The warehouse fell silent, except for the sound of the river lapping against the pier outside. Marco's carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time, his legitimacy burning down around him. "You're bluffing," Marco said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Alexander held up his phone again, showing incoming calls and messages flooding in. "Channel 7 wants a live interview. The FBI wants to schedule a meeting. And your daughter Elena just sent a text message that I think you should see." He showed Marco the screen. The message was short but devastating. "Is it true? Did grandfather really do those things? Did you kill people?" Marco's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea what you've done. You think the law can protect you from me. I think the law doesn't need to protect us anymore," Alexander replied, "because we just gave them everything they need to destroy your entire organization." But Catherine Torino was smarter than her son, more ruthless, more willing to burn everything down to save herself. "Marco," she said quietly, "kill them. Kill them now and we'll deal with the consequences later. Mother, they've already... I don't care what they've broadcast. Dead witnesses can't testify in court." Marco drew his gun, his face a mask of rage and desperation. Around the warehouse, his bodyguards followed suit, weapons aimed at Alexander, Maya, and baby Sophia. Alexander felt his heart hammering as he realized they'd made a fatal miscalculation. Yes, they'd exposed the truth, but that wouldn't save them if they died in the next 60 seconds. Then Maya did something that shocked everyone in the warehouse. She handed Sophia to Alexander and walked directly toward Marco, stopping just inches from his gun. "Shoot me," she said calmly. "Go ahead. But first, look at your phone." Marco hesitated, confused by her lack of fear. "Check your messages, Marco. Check what's happening to your business empire right now." Against his better judgment, Marco glanced at his phone. His face went from confused to horrified in seconds. "What did you do?" "While you were confessing to murder, federal agents were serving warrants on every one of your legitimate businesses," Maya explained. "Your construction company, your restaurants, your waste management operation, they're all being raided simultaneously. Your bank accounts are frozen, your assets are being seized, your employees are being arrested." Alexander watched in amazement as Maya continued her psychological assault on a man holding a gun to her face. "But that's not the worst part, Marco. The worst part is that everyone in your organization now knows you've been exposed. How long do you think before your own people start making deals to save themselves? How long before they start giving up your locations, your safe houses, your escape routes?" Marco's phone kept buzzing with incoming calls. Panicked associates, desperate lieutenants, lawyers demanding explanations. His carefully constructed criminal empire was collapsing in real time. "You think you can destroy me?" Marco snarled. "I've survived worse than this." "Have you?" Maya asked. "Because I don't think Vincent ever faced simultaneous federal racketeering charges, murder charges, and the complete destruction of his legitimate business interests. I don't think he ever had to explain to his teenage daughter why her classmates were calling her father a murderer on social media." Catherine Torino stood slowly, her face twisted with decades of suppressed rage. "Enough. Marco, kill her now." But before Marco could pull the trigger, the warehouse doors exploded inward. FBI agents flooded the space, their tactical lights blinding everyone inside. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." The next few minutes were chaos. Shouting, confusion, the sound of weapons clattering to the concrete floor. Through it all, Alexander held Sophia close while Maya stood calmly in the center of the storm, watching the Torino empire finally collapse. When the dust settled, Marco and Catherine Torino sat in handcuffs while agents collected evidence and weapons. The dynasty that had terrorized New York for decades was finally ending. Agent Sarah Mitchell approached Alexander and Maya, her expression a mixture of relief and admiration. "That was either the bravest or most insane thing I've ever witnessed," she said. "Walking into a trap to get them to confess on live broadcast. Sometimes you have to give predators what they think they want to catch them, Alexander replied. What happens now? Maya asked. Now you testify. Both of you. Help us build cases not just against the Torinos, but against everyone who worked with them, everyone who helped cover up their crimes for the past 26 years. Alexander looked at Maya, seeing not the desperate homeless woman he'd found in an alley 10 days ago, but a warrior who'd just brought down one of the most dangerous crime families in America. Are you ready for that? He asked her. Maya looked around the warehouse where her mother's killers had just been arrested, where Isabella's murderers would finally face justice, where the cycle of violence that had defined her family for generations had finally been broken. I'm ready, she said, but as they left the warehouse together, Alexander's phone buzzed with a message that reminded him their victory came with a price. It was from Elena Torino in Switzerland. Thank you for showing me the truth about my family. But you should know, my father has friends you haven't thought of, people who won't care that he's in prison. This isn't over. Alexander showed the message to Maya as they walked toward the FBI vehicles that would take them to safety. She's probably right, Maya said quietly. There will be others who want revenge, other people threatened by what we've exposed. Are you afraid? Maya shifted Sophia in her arms, looking back at the warehouse where her family's nightmare had finally ended, then ahead toward an uncertain but free future. No, she said finally. For the first time in my life, I'm not afraid anymore. We have each other now. We have family. And family means you never have to face the darkness alone. Alexander smiled as they climbed into the federal vehicle, baby Sophia sleeping peacefully between them. In 10 days, his life had been completely transformed. He'd found family, discovered love, faced down monsters, and learned that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought in boardrooms, but in the shadows, where good and evil met in their rawest forms. As the car pulled away from the warehouse, carrying them toward a new life built on truth instead of secrets, Alexander realized that finding Maya in that alley hadn't just saved her life, it had saved his soul. Her life, it had saved his soul.